Hello, in this video I'm going to continue where I left off talking about shader graph, and I pretty much not even touched the scene here and come back at the end of the day as I've had a few ideas of some things that I'd like to introduce. So let me just rotate this light round so we get these little shadow artifacts which seem to be a bit prominent. One way to get rid of those is to deal with the bias. Use pipeline settings. Let's do custom. Oh yeah, look at that. And just move that until they go away a bit. Right, shadows don't matter here. So we've got the graph. Let's go back to that and look at it again. We've got the graph here and we've got a little bit of vertex color here. Now you can control, you can use vertex color to control things. So just think of vertex color as your three channels, red, green and blue. You might even have access to alpha here as well. So you basically have four channels over and above a base texture. So let's say you've got this cube, it's got UVs and you've got the base texture on it. Right, but over and above that you've got red channel, green channel, blue channel, alpha that can act as masks, and you kind of layer up detail into a mesh. So just think of each of those channels, so you can paint those colors and you can read the values in those channels, those vertex color channels, and use them to drive a kind of layering system. And you can stack up like 5 because you've got the base, red mask, green mask, blue mask, alpha mask. So let's just look at the vertex color here, right? It says it spits out 4 vectors, 4 values between 0 and 1. And just like the lerp function here, we use a float value to control between A and B, right? So the result can be one thing or another, and we can use that to layer things up. It might take a while for you to get your head around this, but just think of it as like sets of scales. So you put something on the left side, it's like that. You put something on the right side, it's like that. So you get 2 different results, right? And you can get anything in between. That's what the lerp function does. It's doing this on the left side, this on the right side, and this is controlling what side it's on. A bit like mixing decks. If you're a DJ, you've got the left CD or the left track and the right track, and you can mix between them. Okay, so vertex color holds a vector 4 here, and we can actually drag that out and type in split, and that's going to give us access to each of those channels, red, green, blue and alpha. So if I suddenly take the red channel of the vertex color and plug it straight into the albedo, we're basically only going to see a black and white version based on where I've painted this red, right? There's some red tint in maybe some parts of it, but you'll see this come through, right? I don't want to put it in albedo because it's harder to see it because it's still affected by lighting. I'll put it straight into emissive so we can really see it. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's in both. Now when I save this, I'm going to lose a few access to a few things. Like these won't matter because they're not. There's no result of that calculation being sent out to the output stuff. Right. All I'm seeing is what is in the red channel of the vertex color. It's a black and white value. It's nothing or something. It's between 0 and 1. Or 0 and 255, but it's normalized. It's basically turned into 0 to 1, 0.5, 0.75, etc. Right, so where I've painted it red, it's gone white. You're thinking, wait a minute, it's red, it's not white. Well, each of those channels is holding a value, and that value is 0 black or 1 white, right? So it's grayscale. It's the only way it can read it. It doesn't treat it as red, you know. It doesn't know it's red. It just knows that it knows it's a value. When those channels are combined, red, green, blue, and alpha, it makes the color and opacity, right? So basically I can now, I'm going to flood the object with black. I think, yeah, there we go. So flood with black, and then when I paint in red, so we'll go brush, red. I think it's showing me a preview. It showed me a preview before I click the button. Show me what I'm going to get based on where I'm close to the edge there. That's quite interesting. I've not even pressed the button yet. Then I click and it gives me what I want. So imagine this black and white system as a masking system where it's white, we can allow a different thing to happen. Okay. And that's going to be like that 0 to 1 controller. Okay, so Vertex Color, red channel, we've basically got a red mask. I'm going to disconnect it from, which button does it? From these, so Alt and click, I think. Click and delete. Okay, click and delete. Right, so I've completely disconnected everything from this. It's all kind of back to default again, but I've still got all the working nodes on the left hand side. So let's think about this. You've got a base texture, and we're going to say there's going to be another texture, right? That's what we're going to say. There's going to be another texture. So there'll be two textures, and where the red channel exists of the Vertex Color painting, that's going to be white. It's going to lerp in this other texture, right? So we need two textures. We've got one already. So I can even rename this as base texture or texture base or whatever. Texture base, right? And I'll add another texture and I'll call this texture red, right? It's not a red texture, it's a texture that's going to be lerped in via the red channel of the Vertex Color painting, right? It's not that hard to think about. You've painted a bit of the model red. All your verts hold a color value that nobody ever bothers to access. It's not a texture, it's the actual points of the mesh can contain color data, but nobody ever uses it, right? It gets used now and again. You'll see Vertex Color shaders here and there, right? So we can now plug in, let's see, so we've got a base color. Let's just get rid of this one for now, this blender value, okay. Right, so all we care about is this base texture coming in. Let me just put these aside. I might use them again later, right? That was just to mix the base color with the Vertex Color, but we don't really need that. So we've got a texture comes in into this sample 2D, right? That's how the texture's set up, and this red channel of the Vertex Color has been split. So what we want to do is create another one of these, another texture sample, but we're going to pipe in the texture red. Okay, let's just take that away just to make sure we've got texture base here, and then plug that into that one. Texture red, plug it into that one. Okay, so it's two actual textures that are maybe tileable textures or the base textures like the actual mesh texture. And we can check that with different things. So it's going to be controlled with the red channel here. So what we need again is a lerp. So create node lerp. Lerp is just your mixer that mixes between A and B, a certain value. So if we put the texture coming from this into A and the texture coming from this into B, and we control that with the red channel of the coloring, then let's get rid of that. Then we put this straight into, I'll put it straight into emissive so it's not affected by the light, it's just self-lit. That way it's like a self-lit object. And as soon as I save, those two textures are there. We've got a base texture and we've got texture that lives in here. Now you can already see where I've painted it red. It's kind of fading because there's no texture here. But as soon as I add something, let's do this default particle, then you see that, right? It's a bit hard to see what's happening here because of well, this is actually, should be white. Let's do save asset, right? And the textures aren't really tiling enough, so I'm going to quickly tile those by affecting the UVs. I think I may be able to do tile, yep, tiling and offset, right? And this is like a little UV node, and I can basically say tile 10 times on X and Y, right? And it's just going to affect that texture. It's just a tiling thing. I'll do the same for this one. I'll just plug it straight in there. So both those textures are being tiled 10 times across and down. So I'm going to save the asset. And now you can see it's gradually lerping to this one from the checker. Wherever I paint red, I'm going to that other texture. There you go, I've just made that whole side a value of 1 in red, like completely red. That then controls the mixer, kind of like your mixing decks, and it's basically saying, oh, where it's red, you basically want B, right? So you've got that, and basically you can do that again. You can get another texture and say texture green for the green channel, controlled by the green channel, right? You can name this however you want. This makes sense to me, right? And I'm just going to drag that in. It needs one of these texture sample nodes to be able to be red, and then I just want to pipe that in there, and that's the texture it's going to read. Let's do the tiling again on it, just in case, and we're going to take the result of base mixed with red, right? The base texture that's on it mixed with the texture controlled by the red vertex color. The result of that now becomes the new A, becomes the new base layer, right? It's the new base layer, and we're kind of just doing the same thing. We're piping this into B, but this time we're controlling it with not the red channel of the vertex color split, but the green channel. So I'll just take the green and I'll put that in here, and then the result of that into emissive. And you can see you could layer that up again with the blue channel and again with an alpha channel, and you can paint all these things here, no problem, right? So I'm just gonna save that, and there's a new green texture come up there. I don't have the best choice in textures here, so I'm just going to load in some that I've used for a different thing. So I'm just going to import new asset. I've got some textures that I was messing around with just this morning. Import those, and we got camouflage, we got some pattern here, and we got a blue pattern, right? And they've all been tiled a good bit. So you can see this is the base, so everything's basically camouflage. If I fill this object with black, so I'll do a fill and then click, come on, fill, yeah. Oh, this is just each face. Okay, sure. So flood each face. And that's that. So the whole base has got this kind of camouflage texture. Well, let's say I want to bring in this one. Well, I'm going to paint it red. So I'll do brush, red color. And you see, as soon as I start painting red, it becomes that texture. And then if it's in between base and red, basically it's not got any color in it. It's going to act like the base. As soon as I paint it in red, it's going to become this one. And as soon as I paint it in green, it's going to become the blue one. So I can basically use the vertices to paint different details. Let me just change the light so that we actually don't have to see it. 2.1, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back into this. Let's say we want to control the tiling of each of these textures independently. So just now I've got this one node affecting all three, right? I'm just going to disconnect it from there and there. and copy it, and copy it again. Right, so I've got independent control of each of these textures, UVs. So what's the second one there? Okay, so connect that up to the UV, and this one here, connect that up to the UV. And I could type in values like, well, this one 5 and 5, and this one 3 and 3, right? I save that, and now we've got 3 different textures. That's been tiled 10, 10. This one's been tiled 5, 5, and that one like 3, 3, okay? But I don't have control of it. If I go to the material here, I've got this slider that does nothing because it's not connected anymore. The base color is not connected anymore, so it's not doing anything. The only things that I can change is the texture here. So if I want to control the tiling, I'll need to expose some more numbers. So if I just find the output node thing, which has decided to disappear. No, it's here. It's in disguise. I'm going to add, I'll just do a vector 1 because we're just going to make it tile the same X and Y values. So I could call this base tiling, right? Default of 1, change it to a slider, and maybe let it go up to like 20, right? So maybe from 1 to 20, minimum of 1, maximum of 20, right? Save that. So this is just a number that I'm going to use to say how much that base texture, that camouflage one, tiles, but I want it inside this. See, it's there already, right? It is there when I saved it, but it's not plugged into anything. It's because I put it here, it's read it in and then, oh, you've got base tiling, it goes from 1 to 20, but it's not doing it yet. I have to drag it out, and then I have to say, well, it's going to be this value, okay? So I've got 10, 10, it's a vector 2, but if you use a vector 1 into a vector 2, it reads both values the same. So if I put 20 in this, like, it will say 20, 20 sort of thing, but we plug it straight through that into this, right? And then I save it, and now you can see if I choose this, I change the slider, I'm getting some tiling. So that's pretty cool if you've got some noisy dirt decal that tiles and you want to just paint a little bit of dirt on the, you know, a part of a gun or some blood spatter or just like a pattern on it, then you can totally do that. So base tiling, we need another one for the tiling for the red texture. So we'll call it red tiling. Okay, and I'll do another one, green tiling. Right, so I drag that one in, and I drag that one in. I want to find their things, so green's down there and red's there, right? So we get the base, red channel, green channel. That's like a 3-layer system. We could go more, we could do blue and, you know, maybe a bit overkill by that point. So I'm going to put that in there. Let's just make sure default, let's do default 1, slider, again 1 to 20, and the green one, default 1, mode, slider, 1 to 20, and then save asset. And now I've got control of all 3, so the red tiling and the green tiling. Why is the green tiling not doing anything? Because I've not plugged it in yet. Since I plug that in and save, that will now update. So that's it. I'm controlling the other textures coming in through these lerp nodes. The lerp nodes are controlled by the vertex colors. Vertex colors are in every mesh, but you don't ever really use them. So try to think of an example. Maybe old mobile games, they used vertex colors. Very old, like PlayStation 1 or even the Sega Saturn, and even like before that, PC games back in the 80s and 90s, when they didn't have textures, they used colours instead. So each point just held a colour value, and then it just kind of did a gradient towards the next point, whatever value that was, and that's what we seen in the first video. I'll put a link to the first video just below here, just in case you've missed that one, because that is the sort of core to this Vertex Color. So paint red. Let's just put that back on, red. Go. So when I paint red, we're getting that other texture. Like you see, it's good for doing gradients between two materials. And if this was a more complex object, like a sphere, let's try that. So I'm going to add 3D object sphere. Let's move that aside. And I'm going to put the very same material on this, right? Thinking to yourself, wait a minute, that doesn't look like that. Yeah, it's the same material. Yep. It's because we've not done any vertex paint on it. In fact, this has been vertex painted white. And because it's white and not black, it's not doing the base layer. It's not even doing the red layer. It's doing the last layer that it remembers, because that lerp function is basically saying, if lerp is 0, it's going to use the base, right? And that's because it's black, right? It's going to use the base. But if it's not black, it's white, it's going to use the next thing. And then it's coming through to the next channel and saying, okay, if so that was red, and if it's green is 1, then it's going to use the next texture. So basically, because this has been painted white by default, that's the default Vertex Color, and it's using the last texture that it's got in that little stack lerp system. So I'm going to actually fill it with black. Okay, or flood with black, that's what we want. Right, see, as soon as I click on that, it's now flooded with black Vertex Color, which means it's defaulting back to the base, because it's not been driven through those lerps through any value from the red or green channel. But as soon as I do brush red, so a little bit of red, we're getting the texture that lives in texture red. And as soon as we paint a little bit of green, we're getting the texture that lives in the green. And if we paint red plus green, which is yellow, we'll get a mix of these two. Can't really see it too well. Let's try. Yeah, so it is actually a mix of those two, but you don't see it so well. Let's do green again. Green gives us that more completely. And if we do a mix between green and nothing, so a dark green should give us a mix between the camouflage and a bit of the last one. There you go. It's a bit of a wacky system to get used to at first, but it's basically like having 4 layers of tracing paper. Your base layer, and then if you want to use the red channel, you've put a bit of tracing paper on top of it, and it's got a pattern on it, and you can see a bit of it. And then you want to put another layer, and like they're all kind of semi-transparent, and they all kind of merge together, right? It's all just one material at the end of the day, so it's quite effective. Right, so that's done, and we can easily go back to this and play with the tiling. Obviously, that's the only thing that affects both of them. But how cool is that? That you can basically use Vertex Color to change the pattern really easily. So we'll give it a go in setting this up. I'll show you the full graph. I'll just talk through it, what it's doing. So I'll start at the fact that it's been plugged into emissive, just means it's a self-lit material, right? This lerp function is taking whatever comes into A and whatever comes into B, and this T value is deciding is it A or B. A would be a 0 value in here, and B would be a value of 1 in here. That value is coming from the green channel of the Vertex Color that we paint using this tool, and the tool is called Polybrush, and to find that tool, that's inside Package Manager. You open that up and there it's there, and you can install that. Right, back to this. We've got another lerp function before it reaches this for the A channel, and this one reads texture into A, texture into B, and is controlled by the red channel. So when you paint red on it, we're getting the second texture, right? And then this is just the first texture. So first texture goes into A, second texture into B, that then goes into a new lerp, that's the new A, and then the third texture goes into B. First texture doesn't need any control because it's always there. The second texture is controlled by the red painting, and the third texture is controlled by the green painting. And all of that comes from this Vertex Color node, which you can get if you do create node, type in Vertex Color. Vertex Color is built in. As soon as I take that same node and put this into emissive instead and save, you'll see these will turn into the respective vertex colors that I painted them. That should actually have been yellow, not purple. Curious. Let's try. Brush. Ah, okay. These are different channels. Still weird. Let's turn them off like that. There we go. Right, so if I paint a bit of yellow on these, we should get a mix of the red and green textures, which, if we look back at the material, is the red texture, this grey camel and blue camel. So as soon as I go back to the shader graph and get rid of that now and plug in what we had before into emissive, save that. Yeah, so if I paint with yellow, I'm basically getting a mix of those. And that is how you do vertex type of masking. It's similar to what you would get if you were painting a terrain, but this can be used on meshes. It's UV based, it's not triplanar mapping, it's not based on projections, it's based on the UVs of your object. So you will get bits where it doesn't marry up at edges when there's been a UV split there. Okay, so to look at this again, we basically have a tiling node and a tiling parameter, texture parameter here, a control value here, vertex color, a split node, another texture node going into the tiling and offset, tiling, texture node, texture sampler, lerp node, and the green channel, the green tiling into the tiling offset, the texture into a texture sampler, into another lerp node. So there's two lerp nodes, and the output. Okay, that's basically it. Let me see if I can full screen this. Full screen. Let me just drag it out, bring it back in here, full screen it, and you can see the whole thing perfectly. Base tiling is a vector 1, red tiling, green tiling, they're all vector 1s that have been created here through a vector 1. They go into the tiling and offset node, which you can find if you do create node, tiling and offset. You take the result, you put that into the UV of the texture. Same for that one, same for that one. So basically, these are the three texture nodes: base, red, and green, vertex color, split, into a lerp, into a lerp. And that's it. all the parameters for that are here. There's base color. This blender node's no longer used. You can actually delete that. Base color if I need it. Let's get rid of those. Base color if I need that as well. I could tint the base color if I wanted, but let's get rid of that. So the vertex color is used to drive the mix between each of these textures. This being the base texture, if I didn't have these two, that would be all you'd see. The red channel coming from the vertex color is mixing this texture in over and above that one through this lerp node. That red channel is connected to the T part of lerp. This texture is connected to the A part. This one to the B part. The result of that is now the new A part for this lerp, and that's now this texture is the B part for that one, with it being controlled by the green channel. So I've explained everything, I think, in about 3 different ways. Vertex color information comes from the mesh. You have to paint it with that poly brush tool. The shader looks at the colors from that and then uses those lerp nodes to change between one texture and the other. It's like a mask system. You do that once for the base to the, base to what's in the red texture channel that we gave it. The result of that then goes into another lerp, and then that gets mixed with what's in the green channel texture, and then that goes to the output. There's nothing more to explain. You could copy this and not understand it if you want, but it'd be a good idea to get used to what it's doing. Lerp functions are really handy, and yeah, shader graph is nearly as good as Amplify shader, which I've used a lot, which is basically modelled off Unreal Engine's material shader, which is all node based. You don't have to program anything, and I think you could possibly generate code from this. Yeah, compile and show code, and that would create a code version of it, and you could see how it's programmed. But it's so much easier just to use nodes for this kind of thing, because you get the visual feedback right away. You don't have to type, save, go back in, come back out. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You're able to test all the sliders that you've made as you go, tiling. And it's just really nice. It's a nice way to get unique looking stuff. So I hope this has been an in-depth enough beginner tutorial for using shader graph. That might look complicated, but it's not. Some of the graphs I've made are huge, and shaders are pretty powerful for getting really good results. I would say steer clear of using any sort of if nodes, any nodes that have to test a value with another, because it kind of breaks the shader in a way. It makes it slow. GPUs aren't really good at those kind of checks. It just likes to pass numbers through itself, and what you do with it is based on the nodes coming in, and you do a change to it and then just send it out again. A bit like using a synthesizer or something. Hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave a question if you're not too sure, and I'll try to cover it in a new tutorial. I could do a node by node type tutorial, but that would be a whole lot of searching. Who knows, maybe I'll do that in the future. But feel free to ask me anything as you're learning this, and I'll be obliged and happy to answer. Thanks for watching. Bye.